is it's a bit tight around here. The common problem in most garages, you get your car in and you've got no room. But when the car's out, you've got a perfect workspace. And if you're a DIYer, you're definitely going to want a workbench. And that's exactly what I'm putting here. But the only difference is my one's going to fold up and down. That way, you get the best of both worlds. All right, for the bench top, I'm just using 30mm thick plywood. Now, you can get this straight off the shelf from the hardware store. The only thing I need to do is cut it down to size so it fits into our space. All right, that's the bench top taken care of. Now, I'm going to get onto the legs because that's going to determine our height. And for that, I'm just using these 90x45s and I'm going to laminate 2 of them together. And the height, well, that's 800mm. Now, the reason why I'm laminating these legs together is because I want it to have a solid look, and also it's going to give us added strength. I'm just using PVA glue and a brush to put it on, which will give us even coverage, and then a few bugle screws to hold it all together. Now the leg's done, I can show you how this is going to work. So you can imagine the leg's down, and with a strap hinge, this is what's going to make it a folding bench. So basically it'll be folded up against the wall in this position, and then it comes down, and you can see it's a right angle, and that's where our bench goes. That means I'm ready to fit the hinges. All right, now the last thing I need to do to these legs before I set them aside is I'm putting a check out in each leg. That way, when these are attached to the table later on, when we bring them down, I'll add a piece of timber through, and that will make the legs come down in unison. Okay, this is how it is going to work. So we've got our legs. I'm going to space the 3 of them out. And you'll see that we've got this front perimeter beam that will go right across here. Now, one thing when you're spacing the legs that you need to be careful of is obviously these legs, as the table drops, are going to open. And if you're too close, you can see here, they're going to bind on the timber. So you need to set it forward enough so the legs open up to a right angle. And then the rest of the frame just sits between the legs like so. Now, the only thing left to do is to screw it off. Right, all the legs are on, and you can see this workbench is taking shape, but it's time to brace the legs up and tie them all together. And that's exactly what this bit of timber will do. All right, now you can see how the legs work in unison. Now, there's one more step to do before we get this attached to the wall, and that's to put the hinges each side. And so we can attach the bench to the wall. I'm just putting this timber on, then our hinges will get connected to that, and that will allow the whole thing to operate. At this point, you definitely want to get a friend in to help you out because it is a little bit heavy, and then they can hold the bench in place while you screw the hinges off. How you looking, Scotty? Good. And a coat of clear cabothane will protect the top and keep it looking good. And look at that, a folding workbench. And to hold it in place, I'm just using a spring-loaded gate latch. And I've got to say, even if you're not into DIY, I reckon you wouldn't mind this bench in your garage. It's always surprising what you can do with recycled timber. Old fence palings and scrap wood can be a feature of your house and a real talking point. And what's more, you can have something that's expensive to buy for free. Well, almost for free. Who's counting glues and screws? Now, in this kitchen, I think the perfect project is a butcher's block. It's a useful add-on and easy on the eye too. The timber that I'm using for this butcher's block is some Oregon. The good thing about that is you can find it in most old houses. I picked this up from a house that just got demolished. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is dress this timber up with a planer, but you need to make sure that you go through and remove any old nails, otherwise you do a lot of damage to your planer. And the other great thing about Oregon is these amazing colours you get out of the timber. For the top, I'm cutting a heap of these little 100mm blocks. So the end product will go together like so, and you'll see the end grain of all these blocks. That means I've got a lot of cutting to do. All right, that was a mission. We're ready to glue these blocks up. Now, there's a few tips that you need to remember before we start. I've just got some black plastic here. I'm gonna put that over the workbench. That way, our workpiece doesn't get stuck to the workbench. And also, to apply the glue, I'm just using a paintbrush. That way we get even coverage. Lucky last piece. Right, now it's all glued up. I'm just gonna get some scrap timber and I'm just gonna clamp it up and wait for it all to dry. While the top's drying, I'll get on to making the frame, and I'm using Oregon for that too. The only difference is, instead of planing this timber down, I'm going to use a belt sander. Now, I'm using a 36 grit for the belt sander. I'll then change to the orbital sander, which has an 80 grit on that. I've just cut the legs to length using the drop saw. Then I'm doing a checkout at the top that the frame will sit around, and also at the bottom of the legs to hold the rails that will strengthen the whole thing. I'm using the circular saw to cut the 45-degree angles to make the perimeter of the frame. To put it together, it's just like a 3D jigsaw. Position the frame into the checkouts at the top of the legs. Glue and screw, then patch the rails at the bottom. All right, the top's dry. That means we can get on to dressing it. So I'm going to be using the belt sander to start off with the 36 grit sandpaper. So it's nice and coarse and to really get all these high spots off. Then I'm going to swap over to the orbital sander, which will have an 80 grit paper on it, and then I'll work my way up to a 120 grit. All right, you can see that it's all sanded up. So now I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to pre-drill some holes, my fixing holes. So you'll notice that everything in here is hidden fixings. So instead of bringing our screws in through the face here, I've come in through the back of the post, and I'm doing exactly the same for the top. So I'll do my clearance holes. All right, now I can sit the frame on our butcher's block, and then I can put the fixings in using 150 bugles, and that way you'll never see them. While I've got it upside down, I'm just adding these casters so you can move it around wherever you need to. And you can see these ones are pretty fancy. I'm putting a lockable one on each end and then just a standard one on the other legs. All right, now we're ready to put some oil on this. And obviously, because this is a butcher's board that's going to be in contact with food, you just want to make sure that you use a food-grade oil. Whew, this has some weight in it. Oh, how good is that? Gorgeous. Not me, the butcher's block. All done. Only one thing left to do. That's to get it in the kitchen. How bulky and rustic does this look? It looks fantastic. You can see that I've just added on these hooks and a shelf for extra storage. And the best part is I've saved all this timber from the landfill, but also I've saved cash, so that's a win-win.